folks, welcome back to Only the Best Fantasy Novels. My name is Robin, and today I want to talk about Ruin, the third book in the Faithful and the Fallen series by John Gwynne. This is the other book I was told that this is where the series supposedly gets good. It's the third of four books, so take from that what you will. But yeah, this is supposedly like where it really heats up. And if you've watched my previous two videos in the series, you'll know that I may not be having the greatest time with it, but I am continuing to read it, mainly because I'm a completionist as a reader. Like, I can't stop. In addition to that, I did buy all four of these books, and I refuse, if I spend money on something, I refuse to not try to enjoy myself as much as possible. So even if these reviews may come across as negative, whatever, like, I really am trying my best here to enjoy these books. So, and that actually kind of actually allows, tangentially touches on some of the things that I want to talk about with Ruin, that this book got me thinking about. So Ruin, honestly, I'm not going to discuss too much about the plot, because I do have some very specific things to say about the plot, and I can't really discuss it without taking that into effect. But essentially, it's just a continuation of the story what we've seen so far. Corbin faces a choice now where he acknowledges himself as the bright star. He has to choose how his faction will proceed, and other things happen to other people. The Dark Sun has they gain possession of one of the 7 magical artifacts at the end of the series, one of the most powerful ones, and they're that much closer to bringing Azoth into the flesh and to essentially dominate the God War that's taking place in the Banished Lands. The Benilim and I forgot what's the word for the other for Azeroth's forces, but yeah, they play a much more prominent role in this book as well. But yeah, so right off the bat, I want to touch on the characterization. As before, the majority of the characterization is mainly Corbin as the quote-unquote hero of the story, and the other people are essentially little more than set pieces. They may have the occasional POV, they may have a little more may have a little more fleshing out, but nothing in the manner in which Corbin has. I will say that one of the benefits of this series being actually blood-soaked and a ton of people dying is that the cast has reduced as a result, and as one of the benefits of the cast being reduced is that John Gwynne is able to kind of drill in more on these characters that are now essentially important, essentially pivotal to the story. So we do get a bit more fleshing out. Like, this is the first book in this trilogy where I wasn't completely confused by or completely lost as to who's who with which faction and who these people even are, because as I mentioned, like, the characterization in the previous books was so terrible that I really struggled to keep them straight, if I even managed at all, beyond a few key people. So there's that. One thing I did think about with this is that maybe it's intentional that these characters are not being fleshed out. Maybe it's an intentional. What I'm reacting to is an intentional writing choice to not flesh out these characters as much as possibly, because this is very much the story of the Bright Star and his quest to win the God War. And maybe what I'm perceiving as a decision, as basically as an issue with this book, as a shortfall, is because most fantasy that's written to these days, it focuses much more on character. Like, we're all about the character exploration, the character arcs, these kind of things, and those stories do tend to resonate better with me. but maybe it's intentional that that's not being done here. What muddles the situation is that it's done for Corbin, but not necessarily for everyone else who plays like a pivotal role. They are, like I said, they were fleshed out a bit more in Valor, and they're fleshed out even more so in Ruin. So it does muddle the situation a bit. I think it's either the characterization so far in this trilogy, and with this I'm thinking back on all 3 books so far. Maybe it started off not being able to do it for the sake of word count or whatever, but now that the cast is much smaller, the significant cast is much smaller, like it allows him to actually explore these things intentionally. So maybe what I perceived as an issue or as a shortfall was actually an intentional writing decision. I'll leave that up to it. What I can say is that I, as someone who enjoys character-driven stories, this series has not worked for me so far, and up until this point, up until Ruin, when I started to think about that, when I really got into this book, and it allowed me to make that mental shift that allowed me to enjoy that aspect of it just a little bit more. The second thing is the plot. Now, in that I wanted to touch on is the plot, and this is why I didn't give too much of a summary of the book like I usually do. So, like with Epic Fantasy, I'm accustomed to there being an overarching plot for the series, and then each character has basically their own subplot. Each significant character essentially has their own agency, their own subplot, and the book is essentially one overarching story with these subplots intermingled, and you have the overarching. So you're basically dealing with like a multi-layered plot scenario. That is not the case with John Gwynne. Yes, our characters have to go through their motions of their individual stories, but in terms of the plotting, it's very minimal. It's the focus is very much on that overarching plot. Like Ruin could be combined with Valor, and a lot of stuff stripped out, and it could just be one book. That's how this book read. It read like a direct continuation with no stopping. A lot of things could have just been dropped, and it could have just been one book, and it could have been just as effective, I felt, because the plot, like, there's not that distinction with the plot is not there as much as it would be without Epic Fantasy. And once again, maybe this is an intentional decision. Maybe John Gwynne has this one specific story he wants to tell, and it's much like his action scenes, it's no holds barred, everything behind this one story, and we won't get distracted by these side plots, and we won't deal with this bloat and this kind of thing. So once again, take this as you will. Your mileage will vary with this. My personal enjoyment comes from multi-layered, multiple plots progressing both within the context of one story and over the course of the series, and in terms of the character within their individual development and that kind of thing. That's not done here, and that may not necessarily be a bad thing, because this may be an intentional choice. So if it works for you, it works for you. My mileage is kind of flip-flopping a lot with this series. I am trying to find myself in a headspace where I can just enjoy it as much as possible. So I am trying to think of why he's doing what he's doing, which is why I'm discussing all of this in the video. And that's kind of like the two key things I wanted to talk about. What I was thinking about how he's approaching these characters in this plot. Maybe that's why it's just not working for me, but everyone else seems to love it. But yeah, in terms of the world building, it's pretty much the same as before. Like, this is the third book in the series. Not a lot new or fresh is going to get pulled out on us. It's pretty much just, like I said, it's pretty much just a continuation of the previous books. So yeah, and as before, like, the absolute highlight of these books are just the action scenes, the battle sequences. Like, they're just fun. They just make these books enjoyable, entertaining. They do a lot to keep me going, motivated with this series, because at the end of the day, I'm an Epic Fantasy fan. Like, who doesn't love a good battle scene? And like I said, the battle scenes are where John Gwynne really shines. these are the moments where his dialogue just goes to another level. His characterization will often go to another level because he really tries to drive home just the personality of these people right before he kills one of them. So the battle scenes are it's almost like this book it oscillates, and the battle scenes are where it just peaks. And yeah, like all in all, for what this series is, Ruin is a great continuation. My personal enjoyment of it is very iffy. I think I'm gonna be taking. I think this is a series I'm gonna have to let marinate for quite a while before I fully form my opinions on it. I think it's not what I want from epic fantasy per se, but if what I'm thinking about his intentions and the story and what he tries to do here is right, then he's doing a bang up job of it, no doubt about that. At the end of the day, it's all about not every story is gonna resonate with every reader, and like I said, once I spend my hard-earned dollars on something, I am going to try my damn best to enjoy it, and that's what's got me. That's probably the primary motivation that's got me thinking, trying to analyze these books and think, why is it that what is he doing that is not quite clicking with me, and is it that my biases are not my biases and my thoughts in the genre are being projected on something that is not necessarily trying to conform to what I think it should be. And yeah, so take so this was a bit of a ramble. Take from it what you will. That's pretty much all I have to say about Ruin at this point. I am absolutely going to continue on to Wrath, and let's see how much I enjoy that, and maybe in a few years I'll think back on this series and maybe I'll enjoy it a hell of a lot more than I am right now reading it. Who knows? Like that's a pretty common thing in fantasy, right? Things just the longer they marinate and you get to kind of internalize them, the more they tend to grow on you. So maybe that's what's going to happen with this series, and maybe that's part of the reason why this series didn't quite explode out of the gate when it did, like I talked about in my very first video in Malice. Maybe that's why this series didn't quite it didn't have like a bang up start, but it did develop to the kind of following that I'm seeing it has on booktube a decade after it was released, or well over a decade after it was released. So yeah, if you've made it this far into the video, thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you next time.